ISD Superintendent Steve Flores. Thank you for joining us tonight at Stony Point High School. We're proud to host this conversation about our students' wellness and safety. It's so important. Our community keeps working together to find solutions. One word you'll hear a lot tonight is solutions. In the next 90 minutes, KXAN will show you innovative ideas or solutions being tried across the country, as well as what we're doing right here in Round Rock. Tonight is simply about exploring those solutions. Maybe they'll spark other ideas and keep each of us thinking about ways to help our kids. We hope the discussion is enlightening and that afterward you'll continue the conversation with your family, friends, co-workers, and neighbors. And now, to begin our program, here's a look at KXAN's project called Save Our Students.
When I was a student, students were afraid of coming forward because of the stigma around mental health. We weren't really able to tell our teachers because we were too afraid about what would happen. Santa Fe was a school shooting that happened in 2018. It's kind of what led to school districts really focusing on where can we get the right solution for our students and get this done correctly.
There are so many parents out there who have talked about what's happening in their child's school that we're seeing enough problems that we felt like this is something that needs to be tackled right now, and we want to take a different approach to it.
Solutions journalism is actually looking into things that are working.
What were advantages of this solution?
Can they be implemented in our community or other communities?
Our research took us to Lubbock, our research took us to Ohio, and our research even took us all the way to California. But if you turn to a program that is showing success,
Training its bus drivers to look for students who are potentially suicidal.
A group of moms starting a movement.
There's this new mental health care consortium.
Enhanced video security, enhanced radio systems.
why would you not want to consider that for your own community?
This is a project we've been working on for months. It involves almost 40 people from our newsroom. That's half of our entire staff. That's how important this project is to us. We want to make sure we do it right.
The fact that we work at a place that has slowed down and said, what are some of the things that are most fundamentally important to our community and how can we do a deep dive and address that? It makes me proud.
We're really trying to help with a problem that doesn't necessarily have an easy answer.
A lot of things that they're trying to do have never been done to this scale before.
But the bigger hope for this project is that at least it gets people talking.
I don't think that the conversation around mental health is going away anytime soon. I really hope that these stories that we are sharing with you will turn on a light bulb and say we really need to be looking at not just our neighbors, but our neighbors in other states to say how can we put some of these successes into practice here and improve the lives of children.
Well, good evening to you. We're so happy to have you here tonight. My name is Roger Wallace. I'm the sports director at KXAN TV, and I'll be your host for tonight. Well, like many of you, I'm also a parent, and I'm a parent right here in Round Rock. So we're so happy to be able to be here tonight in front of you. I've also spent time report on the great accomplishments of kids. We celebrate the winning, but we also realize that our youth face a lot of challenges, and that's why we're here tonight. You just learned more about KXAN's project called Save Our Students. In a moment, we'll show you and then discuss some of the stories we've been researching over the past several months. First, though, I want to introduce who's with me tonight, and these two really do the heavy lifting in this project for KXAN. So happy to have beside me Aaron Cargile and Josh Hinkle, both reporting at KXAN for more than a decade. For many years, Aaron has been reporting focused on local education, and Josh's reporting is focused on the government. They're here to tell you more about our SOS stories and discuss them with our panel of guests. Josh, as we get started, important to emphasize tonight, we're discussing positive, proactive ideas.
Yeah, the reality is there's no one perfect solution, but in our research over the past few months, we found a lot of ideas. We're not advocating for any one of them, and we know our communities have limitations like funding and human resources. The point of our project is to simply share ideas from one community to the next and get people thinking and talking and ultimately taking action.
And Aaron, your travels took you beyond Central Texas to learn more about this.
That's right. In the video we mentioned, we went all over the place. So I went to West Texas, found some solutions working in Ohio, and even as far as California. And the point of going there was to explore if those ideas could work here in our local communities.
Now here's a twist tonight because we're actually going to encourage you to text. That's right. We want to hear from you. We want your questions. And there's the information up there. Text to KXAN 829, and then to 22333. And you text for our panel. We'll keep showing you the instructions on the screen. And text us your questions. It will be anonymous, the questions, so feel free to ask anything. We invite our panelists tonight because of their expertise in students' mental health and safety. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our panel. We start with Jeff Yarborough. He's the Director of Security and Safety here in Round Rock ISD. Jeffrey's background includes most recently being the Chief of Police for Bastrop ISD. Thank you so much, Jeff. Beside him, Dr. Amy Grosso. She's the Future Readiness Coordinator for Round Rock ISD. Her role focuses on mental health education and teachers and staff. And also from the Round Rock District is Counseling Services Coordinator LaShonda Lewis. Previously, she was middle school counselor for 10 years in the Pflugerville ISD. Next, we have Karen Reynes, Executive Director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Central Texas. Her group is also known as NAMI. It's the nation's largest grassroots organization focused on mental health education and advocacy. Ruth McIntyre, she's the president of the PTA in Georgetown ISD. She's also a music teacher here in Round Rock, and she's currently researching youth suicide rates as part of a dissertation. And we'd like to welcome Officer David Rodriguez. He's the school resource officer at Vista Ridge High School in the Leander ISD. So again, thank you all for being here. We're looking forward to hearing from all you and your expertise tonight. All right, let's get started. It's time for our first story. It comes from right here in Round Rock. Bus drivers, often the first adults that see our kids at the start of the day, and they're the last to see them when the classes are over. KXAN's education reporter Tom Miller found bus drivers in Round Rock ISD in a unique position to help save our students.
Seatbelts, please.
Safety. It's how Round Rock ISD bus driver Addie Allen starts every trip and has for the past 24 years.
They all have AC now.
The evolution is constant. Cooler buses, buckling up, and now looking out for potentially suicidal students. When Allen noticed a student's unusual appearance and behavior on the bus one day, she reported it to a supervisor.
It was just totally opposite. And me and my monitor, I looked up at her, she looked up at me, we both kind of just shook, you know.
Medics met the bus to help the student when it arrived on campus.
It's so important what we do. A lot of people look at it and, you know, well, they're just bus drivers. No, that's not what it is.
The district trained all 300 bus drivers and bus monitors in suicide prevention at the start of last school year and retrained them at the start of this year.
We thought, well, let's do something different.
Interim Transportation Director Tina Fawcett says the district came up with the idea itself, knowing its drivers interact with 15,000 students a day, giving them the ability to see and hear things other staff don't.
We try to get down to, you know, what's going on. Our drivers, when they know these children, they can tell us those kids are, there's a problem. You know, do we know if it's suicidal? No, we don't. But at least we know that there's an issue.
We know in Texas for teenagers, suicide is the second leading cause of death.
Amy Grosso leads the bus driver trainings.
I don't know if I've ever trained a group so excited for information.
Among the topics covered, warning signs, looking out for students who talk about having no reason to live or feeling trapped, having changes in their behavior including poor sleep, acting recklessly, withdrawing from activities and loved ones, and mood changes like depression, anxiety, or irritability.
They realize they see these signs all the time. They could remember students, but they felt like they knew what to do now.
I might have not noticed it the way I did if something didn't stick from that class that says, you know, something's different here. Maybe something's going on.
Well, Amy, we saw you there in that story. Have to ask, the idea behind this program is not that bus drivers are supposed to fix a problem. They're there to identify something. Can you explain?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times when we think of mental health, for some reason, all of us in positions as parents or staff in a variety of ways, we feel like we're supposed to fix it if there's something wrong. And I try to always equate it that if we look at mental health the same way we do physical health, like if a student has 102 fever, as a teacher or a bus driver or someone else, I don't think it's my job to fix it. I think it's to refer them, notice that there's something happening, and get them to where they need to go next. And so really working with the bus drivers to say, what are you already seeing? But realizing that maybe that's telling us early warning signs, so we're not waiting until a crisis happens. You know, I think we're all good at identifying crisis, but what are those early signs and symptoms to look out for? And then telling somebody else, and like one of our counselors, that can help intervene at that point.
And there are other staff members beyond bus drivers that are able to do this as well. Is Round Rock thinking about expanding this program?
I mean, we've talked some. I developed all the presentations that I've done for staff. They're now on an internal website for any Round Rock ISD staff members. So, you know, one of our library assistants has looked at it and talked to me because she wants to be prepared. And so I think finding a variety of ways to make sure all of our staff have that information and feel confident that they can do something if they see something.
Ruth, I want to ask you a question. We talked about you researching suicide rates. How common is it that someone shows visible signs that they're actually contemplating hurting themselves?
I think what I've seen in the research is that there usually is a call-out person that they call out to, and that they see. Many times they are trying to seek help, but they don't really know where to seek help. And so I think the most important thing is to be able to try and decrease the stigma about talking about youth suicides and child suicides, so that students know that there are people that are here to help them.
Karen, I want to ask you a question from the audience now. Has NAMI presented suicide prevention to students at Round Rock or to any area districts?
Yes, we have. We have a program called Ending the Silence. It's a 50-minute presentation that we do in schools that is both mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And it's a great program because what it really is exactly what we're talking about, which is we have to really shift the conversation around mental health. It really does challenge us, to all of us, to create that safe space to talk about mental health as the health issue that it is. I think it's important for us to see it that way. I love what the World Health Organization has to say, which is there is no health without mental health. And I think that that really also has to begin at home. So in addition to doing some education with students in the schools, we're also providing a really great little workshop for parents of tweens and teens called Let's Talk, and it's just about having a conversation at home. And it's really interesting when I was sharing this with my daughters, my daughter who's in her 20s looked at me and she just smiled and she said, "Mom, you make it sound like it's the sex talk, except it's about mental illness." And I said, it is. That's it exactly. As a parent who almost lost a daughter to suicide 8 years ago, I can tell you that we were afraid to talk about this as parents. And so I do think that so much of this is also about parents being comfortable talking about it and just creating that space for your kid to say, hey, this is normal. This impacts 1 in 5 kids. Especially these days with anxiety. I mean, my youngest daughter lives with anxiety. I mean, and there's so many great coping skills that kids can develop. So we're doing a lot of education because I think the education helps really equip people with the understanding that it's a health issue and that we really have to talk about it.
And I just want to piggyback on that about educating the parents, that I think a lot of times with parents there's this guilt that I did something wrong if my child is struggling, and how that is part of the stigma too, that it's not your fault if your child is struggling with depression or anxiety or one of these things. In the same way if they were struggling with a physical health condition, and how important it is that that conversation is ongoing and that we don't just talk about it one time. I talk with a lot of students, and then high school students, and one thing that they continually say is, can you please help our parents understand?
Well, and being in the classroom as well, I can't tell you how many times we've had kids who have said, because one of the things we really challenge them to is, who's the adult in your life that you can go to and talk to if you're concerned for yourself or someone else? And how many times kids will say, well, what happens when you go to your parent and they tell you, you're fine, there's nothing wrong? And from a parent's perspective, I can share that. And I think it's really important that we recognize, we talk a lot about stigma. It's a word that we use a lot related to mental health. But I want to challenge you to really see it as what it really is, which is shame. Shame says there's something wrong with me. As a parent, I very much thought that I had failed as a parent. I sat in that psychiatric hospital as my daughter was being admitted, and I went through this list of everything that I obviously had done or failed to do as a parent that we had ended up where we were. I would have never done that if she ended up in there because she was in a diabetic coma, right? So we have to really shift and understand that this is a shameful topic, and it shouldn't be, because it's a health issue. And as you said, understanding, and I'm thankful for NAMI because I learned a lot from them, and that's how I got involved, because I took a class from them where I came to understand that I didn't have any reason to be ashamed, that it was a health issue, that yes, there were things that I had missed, and that's why I'm so passionate about this work that we do, because I want to make sure other parents are equipped to know what to look for and how to create that space to have, like you said, ongoing conversations about mental health and talk about it openly.
So much of what we've seen in the stories that we've been covering is that the people who have the power to help really have to recognize that this is a problem and go above and beyond. And sometimes that means doing more than what your basic job duty might be. Officer Rodriguez, you're a school resource officer at Leander ISD. That has changed a lot over the years. You're not just a police officer anymore.
Yeah, exactly. We're not just officers. We're like social workers, counselors. I mean, we do a variety of different things when it comes to students. I was on patrol for 3 years on night shift, and to go into the school was a complete 180 in what we did and how we process a certain person or student. Not just the fact that we're doing criminal stuff in the school, but mentally and dealing with them, what they're dealing with at home, what they're dealing with, at school, the bullying situation. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the school that parents, teachers, they're unaware of, that we deal with. And it's it's an eye-opener, as far as coming from patrol. So that's why a lot of agencies are stepping their game up, trying to get officers more mental health training, CIT training. I just did a great training with AISD, Officer Sneed. He put on a great class for us, and it kind of opened up my eyes more to, we need to look at the small things. When we look at the signs that kids are putting out, we need to look at everything, not just the fact that they got in trouble. Why did they get in trouble? What else can we do to help those students? Because sometimes the little things can go a long way with these kids, and they see that you care. They see that you're not just trying to get them in trouble. They will respect you a lot more, and then their friends will come up to you because they're like, Officer Rodriguez or whoever's in that school, help me out, rather than trying to get me in trouble. So it's a big culture change for me.
Jeffrey, maybe you can respond to this. This is a direct question about Round Rock ISD from the audience. Does the district have a text line to report both anonymously and self-report when there is a student or a child in distress? Do you guys know about any of the other districts around here that do something similar?
Yes, sir. Here at Round Rock ISD, we use what's called anonymous alerts, and that allows any person to make an anonymous tip and send that into the district so that we can assess that and immediately respond. In fact, every anonymous alert that comes into the district, I get a text, I get an email, and there are several people who are designated to immediately get that, so that there are many layers of people who can respond and make sure that the resources that are needed to address that concern are focused towards meeting that need.
Officer Rodriguez, does Leander have something similar?
Yes, it's something similar. It's similar to the anonymous alert. You can report anything that happens on campus or off campus, and then all the administrators get the alert, and then obviously they let us know what's going on as well. They keep us well informed as far as if it's something safety concern, if it's something maybe suicidal, or just something that may not seem right, they want us to check out. So yeah, we definitely do have that as well at Leander ISD.
I just wanted to add that another layer that we have within Round Rock ISD is our gaggle alerts. And what that is that it picks up on any keywords that go through our Round Rock ISD servers. And what we've seen a lot with counseling services is that kids will sometimes disguise a cry for help in some work that they may be doing for a class project, or they may send some information to a friend asking for help via email or a Google Doc or something like that. And so gaggle alerts will allow us to capture some of the information that where a child may really be crying out for help but don't have the words to say it.
Yeah, when people have watched the story that you're talking about, that we saw just a minute ago with you in it, talking about gaggle alerts, some of the questions about it were about privacy. Like, how do you balance a kid's privacy but also their protection?
Well, I think all of us can agree, especially with us in the counseling world, there's a certain limit to your privacy. When your safety is in jeopardy or when the safety of someone else is in jeopardy, we're going to go and make sure that we are supporting you in the best way possible before, and privacy is not something that is a high priority at that time if we're looking at saving your life.
And I think with Gaggle too, it's related with our G Suite, like the Google Drive and stuff. So they have to be on the Round Rock ISD account. And so since that's a district held account, their school-aged children, I think, from sitting in meetings, that's how the privacy, like like they have agreed to certain terms and conditions, and that part of that is that the district can know what they're doing.
Yeah, privacy is a big part of the conversation also. I think it really deals with one of the next stories that we're going to be talking about as well.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the text. We encourage you to keep texting and keep this as a conversation, but we are going to move on to our next story. It's about a new law in Texas. Starting this school year, districts must have a plan for assessments when students do make a threat. I want to take you to Weatherford, a district near Dallas. It's a threat assessment model has become an example for many others in the district. And here again is KXN reporter Tom Miller.
With wind whipping, rain pouring, and lightning strikes overhead, our arrival in Weatherford wasn't exactly a picnic, but the unpredictable elements helped us quickly learn something.
As you can see, there's a lot of bad weather coming in. There's a lot of lightning strikes.
This North Texas school district says it's prepared.
Lightning strikes kills more people than tornadoes do. So we're making sure that they are notified. It could impact their dismissal.
This is Weatherford ISD's Security Operations Center, where the weather is taken as seriously as school surveillance.
We could go live and see, is there a suspicious person? Is there someone making demands? What is the situation?
After a major bond passed in 2015, Safety and Security Executive Director Bruno Diaz says the district made significant security upgrades.
Every classroom is equipped with a call button.
However, the biggest changes aren't the physical ones. After 15 years working in law enforcement, Diaz is one of the first to bring the threat assessment screening model to a school campus in Texas.
We have a screening process with questions. Key questions have been identified by the Secret Service, by the FBI in assessing threats. We see how they answer those questions. We're looking at social factors, we're looking at other influences, peer pressure, different things that could be going on in their lives.
Specifically, any threat with the intention of causing bodily injury. Students are deemed either level 1, less severe, or level 2, a heightened risk for carrying out a threat. From last December through May, the district conducted threat assessments on 71 of its 8,000 students.
During that interview, do you dislike this teacher? Why? And if they start to provide reasons, and in that process you ask, do you really feel about hurting? Do you understand what hurting someone truly means?
Sometimes students do, which is when the red flags start going up and the screening process becomes more elaborate, requiring Diaz to fill out an 18-page assessment with questions like, how easily can this student access weapons? Is there a scheduled attack? What is their social status among peers? Do they have a mental health diagnosis? And what kind of family life do they have?
And based on the information we have, we develop a management strategy. That may involve safety plans to make sure that everyone is safe, and also counseling plans. And we assess how well we're doing.
Diaz points to early data showing the threat assessment model is working. Of the 71 students flagged, 70% of the potential threats were de-escalated, 23% stayed as the lower level Tier 1 incidents, while 7% escalated to Tier 2.
Yeah, every camera is connected.
If this all sounds like a novel experiment, it'll soon be a reality where you live too. Starting this year, every school district in the state is required to have a similar student threat assessment model. What do you think about this student threat assessment?
I think it's an important component of keeping the students safe.
Chief Ashley Gonzalez says having this kind of information on high-risk students could be the difference between de-escalating a potential threat and getting caught off guard.
Some of those times those issues can escalate into self-harm or violence against others, and that's what we're trying to prevent.
Part of the benefit, when a student switches schools, there won't be any guessing or reading between the lines when it comes to past disciplinary issues. Instead, a completed threat assessment will be available for administrators to look through.
We want to make sure that if a student has been identified, that they continue to receive services. And just because they're moving to another campus, another school, or promoting to a different grade, that doesn't mean the services stop and that information is not shared.
Weatherford also passes along the threat assessment to other school districts if a student transfers, so long as the new district requests it. Like the threat assessment itself, Diaz hopes this type of sharing can serve as a model for how Texas schools interact with each other when it comes to safety and security.
If I'm a counselor and I've developed an effective strategy with this child, I want to make sure that the strategies that I'm employing are going to be handed off to the next counselor so that we can keep that child on a successful pathway.
So this past legislative session, lawmakers really made this required, that it's going to be in all school districts this school year. This is in direct response to conversations that lawmakers were having out of the shooting at Santa Fe High School. Knowing that all districts are going to have that, Jeffrey, what's that challenge? Does Round Rock already do something like this?
Yes, Senate Bill 11 is what you're referring to. That's required all school districts to establish a threat assessment team. And what you do is you're looking at information that you receive from, it could be from the student themselves regarding self-harm. It could also be information that you receive from other students, parents, or staff members. And you take that information and you assess that information as a team of individuals from different backgrounds. And in that information, what you're looking for are opportunities to provide the correct resources or the services that student may need. Round Rock ISD already does that, and we've also had what's called crisis intervention teams, and those teams assess concerns, whether it's self-harm or harm to others. So we already have that, and what we've done since I've arrived is we've worked through the Texas School Safety Center, who's established the threat assessment toolkits, and they've provided templates and resources and training to allow school districts to bring the standards up and close any gaps that exist so that we can prevent students from harming themselves or from harming others. So it's heightened the level of awareness that we practice as a district, because the ultimate goal is making sure that our students are safe from harm and from situations that may cause further harm to themselves.
I can imagine it's somewhat challenging to figure out, is this just an angry teenager, or is this someone that really does have the capacity to harm someone or themselves?
That is a concern, but the biggest concern is making sure that the services and the resources that they need have been identified based upon what threats have been identified. So the objective for us as a district is making sure that we're funneling as much resources and as many resources and assistance that they need to make sure that our students maintain that our district maintains the highest level of safety for those students. And it's not just within the four walls of the campus. We want to make sure that those resources extend into the homes. We want to make sure that they extend into the communities so that, again, those students are not left without the help and the assistance and the special attention that they need to ensure their safety.
Yeah, Amy, some of the questions from the audience have been about, are there programs like that, or how do you make sure that there are programs that are suitable to address these types of things, whether it's a school bus driver finding that there might be a student who has some type of issue, or whether it's this threat assessment that identifies a threat?
I think the biggest thing is just starting the conversation, right? That if you think about it, 10 years ago, we wouldn't be sitting in this auditorium even having a news station do a whole series on saving our students and being so open about mental health and how that impacts all of us in a variety of ways. So I think the more we talk about it, the more people are willing to be open and seeing the need. I think it's also educating on why it's important. A lot of times when I do trainings and talking even at the risk of suicide, that all of us, but especially our students, are more likely to die by suicide than homicide. And how much effort and time do we put into thinking and protecting our kids as parents from somebody else hurting them, yet not even think about how do I help them not hurt themselves. And so I think it is this basic education awareness piece that has to happen before we can do anything else, and that what we've done at Round Rock, and I think has now led to, and I know LaShonda can talk about this, about some of the mental health services that are about to start being offered.
Yeah, so one of the pieces that we're really excited about, and I know that the word has gotten out about the mental health centers that will be opening up in September with Bluebonnet Trails Community Services. We felt that there was a need for our students to receive that preventive care on our campuses, so we'll be partnering with Bluebonnet Trails to provide mental health services to all of our students throughout the district. That's coming from a very generous, some conversations with our board of trustees, seeing the need for all of our students pre-K through 12 to make sure that we're providing preventive services for them, but also partnering with them to provide those services for parents, because we know that working solely with the child is not going to prevent everything that that child may come into contact with. So providing those wraparound services so that we can support the family as well. But also with Bluebonnet Trails, what we will be working on is providing trauma-informed care for our students. We will start with working with providing that service to all counselors, and then to any staff members that want to partake in that as well. But what that is looking to see what factors are in a child's life that may be possible indicators that there's some harm that may be coming down the road later. So if we can be preventive, then we don't have to work so hard on the reactive portion of it.
Karen, are there programs out there, we've been talking a lot about the adults and the staff members, but are there programs out there that can help students identify some of the troubles that might be going on with their fellow students?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I mentioned the programs that we're doing, which is very much focused on middle school and high school teens and really equipping them with an understanding and the language that they need to talk about mental health. To name who that adult is in their life that they can go to when they're needing help, and whether it's for themselves or for someone else. And then really the great thing about that program is actually that we bring in a young person who had their own onset of some sort of mental health issue in middle school or high school, so they can sort of tell their story, and these are always really inspiring stories of hope. Because I think so often when you're that age and life feels overwhelming and you're stressed and maybe at home nobody understands what's going on, to have a young person come in and say, you know what, here's what you got to do, and you're not going to be in this place where you feel like you are right now. And so I think that can be really powerful. I think there's similar programs like that, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see, you know, Mental Health First Aid just has piloted a brand new program, and I was speaking to one of the national trainers about that, and I think it's going to be really interesting, which is a mental health first aid program that's really geared for teens. And the idea behind that, which was really, I think, brilliant, is that the model is such that they bring it to a school and then every teen in the school gets the training. And the idea is, again, how do we all become aware, and how do we all create that space to have those conversations? Because I think that really is important, that we've got to include, and I've mentioned teens a couple of times, but I think that's teens and kids. I mean, I think we've got to start talking openly about it and equipping them with the language on how to talk about it, because you don't recognize the power of that until you get to see it. And I think about one of my own daughters who, as I think I mentioned earlier, lives with anxiety, and has since she was a little girl, but we never realized it, right? It was always the, don't make eye contact with her in the morning, you know? Everything always felt like it was really dramatic, and, you know, and the reality is that we didn't recognize it until she was like 17. But the ability to give it a name, it's so powerful. Because what happened is, my greatest concern was that, okay, she was going to be going off to college on her own, and are we equipping her with what she needs? And so I still remember the day when she had been texting me about something, which she hadn't done in a while. It's like this constant texting about the same topic, that's something she's concerned about. And then finally I get this text from her and says, never mind, I'm just anxious. And how powerful it was, because she's like, I'm just going to go on a run. You know, she knows now what the things are that she needs in those moments when she's feeling anxious, instead of going to her places where she ordinarily goes, which is this catastrophizing, which doesn't feel rational from a parent's perspective, because you're like, well, why are you freaking out about that? That's silly. So for parents as well, us coming to understand that and being able to name it as well, creates this possibility for our kids to get on track so much faster and not get to the crisis where my oldest daughter did.
Well, and kind of to piggyback on what you were saying, it's really important that we, as parents, develop the language around mental illness and anxiety, but also equipping our kids with the language as well, but also giving them the permission to speak up if they need help. We know from, especially at our elementary and our middle school levels, that kids talk to each other. And one kid will tell another kid that I'm going through something, but that second kid will say, well, I'm not going to tell anyone because I don't want to be a tattletale, or I don't want to lose my best friend if I tell them they're not going to want to be my friend again. But getting kids to understand that there's a difference between just tattling, or reaching out for help for your friend, and helping those two kids, when they get to that place where, well, you said this to the counselor, you said this to the teacher, getting that child that initially said that information, the understanding that they were doing it because they were trying to help you, not that they were doing it to get you in trouble. But the more we can have those conversations with our students to get them to understand what the terminology is and what's actually going on, and giving them the permission to reach out for help for their friends.
I also just want to say too, mental health issues, suicide, it doesn't just affect students. And I think we can talk all day, but if we isolate it and just say our students are struggling with this without us owning up that we as adults struggle with these things too, we are not helping the conversation at all. Last year, a student that had been on our student advisory board that started a walk for suicide prevention in the district, having a conversation with her for a podcast, and we asked at the end, what is the one thing we as the adults can do to help? Like, what's the one thing? And she said, you can work on your own mental health, because if you don't, you never can help us. And I thought, how wise for a 17-year-old to say that, but how true it is. Most of us were raised in a culture where we don't talk about it, it doesn't exist, and I still think if we constantly say it's just a student issue, we're making them feel like there's something wrong with them because we're not admitting that it affects us too. And so I think that's a critical piece that we can't gloss over when we have this conversation.
Ruth, I'm interested in your perspective as a parent. When you see something like these threat assessments, that's a big topic. It's a big change for a lot of districts and for a lot of families. What do you think as a mom?
I think as a mom, you always want your school district to be proactive instead of reactive. You don't want them to wait until there's a problem to try and go in and fix it. So while it is disheartening to hear about having to do those now, I'm very thankful that school districts do, because if it protects one student, it's worth it. When you were talking about the different programs, I know in my research I learned about Hope Squad, and Hope Squad is where it is a peer-based group that comes in and teaches teenagers, teaches kids how to talk about mental health, suicide, and also that it's okay to talk about it, and if someone does tell another student, they know who they need to go to and that it's okay. And I think really the biggest thing is having those conversations. As a teacher as well, my biggest thing is always trying to build relationships with my students. As a parent, I want to know that my kid is protected and has great relationships with teachers. And so as a teacher myself, even though I have half a school, about 700 students, I'm trying to build relationships every day with them. So if there is a problem, I will recognize it, and that's what I hope for my own children. They would have teachers and other parents too. If you're a parent and you see another child that's struggling, they're not always open with you as a parent. Sometimes they're gonna find somebody else, and that's okay, as long as they're talking.
And I like what I've heard, particularly when it comes to being teachers, being staff members, being adults, identifying what's going on in our schools. And when it goes back to the first video we watched, you don't have to be a subject matter expert. You just have to be aware. And you have to care enough to be aware. And so what we're finding is literally we're living up to that one family, because every child that you come in contact with in this district is your child. So you're looking for those changes in behavior. You're looking for those concerns that may arise. And that's the information that we're hoping that students and staff bring to us so that when we go through the threat assessment, we're wanting to make sure, we want to make sure that our students are okay. But we're also wanting to make sure that that student is okay. So there is a very important need and the positive outcome that comes from raising the awareness of what really goes on and the need for adults to identify and address those concerns before they become catastrophic.
With this being such a serious topic, that whatever the outcome could be of reporting something like this could, seriously change the way a student's daily life might be, or their family life, or anything. I'm thinking about, you guys have been talking about that trust and the relationship building and how important it is to find that adult, that person to talk to. And often that's not the parents. So Officer Rodriguez, I'm just wondering, when you have identified a child who maybe needs some help or who has come to you and confided in something, when do you bring the parents in? When are they part of this conversation?
Usually the parents are involved pretty quickly. I usually like to talk to them a little bit to kind of get a little background to make sure it's not the parents that are the problem, because we have some issues where you may have some abuse or something that's going on in the household. I usually get with the counselors right away to see what kind of history they have on the student as well. But it's a team effort. You gotta do due diligence to try to figure out what is going on with this student. It's not always the first thing that they tell you that's going on. It may be something they tell you, and then you do some research, and then it's something that you learn down the line about what happened a few weeks ago, a few months ago, a year ago. Because a lot of these students, they hold on to all this stuff that happens. So it's very key to try to get the parents involved as soon as possible, but to try to get as much information prior so that you're not reopening a wound that may be involved with the parent, unfortunately. So pretty quickly.
And Jeffrey, my last question about this assessment, how long would something like this stay on a student's record?
Well, one of the things you want to make sure is if the student is a threat to themselves or a threat to others, you want to make sure that that information is still available, because that's something that you want to make sure that you're factoring in if additional threats are made, or if they move to another district, or that information is being passed along. So as long as there is a threat or if there's a concern, that information should still be around.
All right, let's move on now. Great questions. Again, the number to text, we appreciate that. We're going to go west now to California. Some lawmakers told us they were appalled at the number of preschool students being expelled. So the state ended that practice, and then it offered help for the teachers to better handle behavioral problems in California. So here's what Erin found out. She went to Concord, that's outside of San Francisco.
It's outdoor playtime at a state preschool east of San Francisco. 1 minute, everything is going smoothly. The next minute, things take a turn.
What happened?
Teaching assistant Luis Gonzalez is faced with another challenging situation.
Ms. Ryan, I'm taking him inside.
It all plays out while Tina Sloan, a mental health consultant, is nearby.
Be careful, thank you.
Watching another interaction between an associate teacher and students.
Oh, I see that big smile.
She's here at Cadango's Baldwin Park campus once a week, closely observing and sometimes adding input in the moment.
He really wants to see what he's doing.
Teacher Luis. But the real work happens later in the day when she sits down with staff like Luis, one-on-one, to unpack what happened.
I didn't really want to confront the child that did the biting, so maybe guidance on how to deal with something like that.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the hesitancy that you had to approach the child that bit?
Luis, a former landscaper, has only been here 8 months, but even Roya Sultani, who's been teaching more than 15 years, is thankful for the extra support.
We willing to learn. We happy for this program to come and show us how to meet the child's needs.
Recently, while Tina was here, a child refused to go inside after playing outside.
And he is screaming, not telling me, and screaming, and Miss Tina came close to me, very quietly came. I said, can you ask him what he's feeling?
The suggestion calmed him down.
He did so good, and he was happy. I was happy, the child was happy.
And it felt good.
It felt good.
You are so proud of what you just created.
Tina is a licensed therapist and now oversees Cadango's mental health consultants. The pilot program launched about a year ago.
I believe that in order to develop socially, emotionally well children, you have to have strong, confident adults that feel prepared and equipped to meet the different needs.
She highlights their strengths and brainstorms ways they can better support students, which includes bringing parents into the conversation.
I wasn't sure what to expect.
Center Director Manuva Segi says prior to a consultant working with teachers, they had therapists who had worked directly with children. Tina says that's the big difference.
There is nothing that I can do once a week for 30 minutes with a child that's going to have the same impact that they can have because they're with those children every day.
Do you see it making a difference?
It's very new. It's about a year, but I have seen some changes in the relationship between teachers, stronger relationship. There is collaboration, bringing the team together.
How many books is he reading?
I have seen some changes in children, and some of the challenging behavior may not go right away, may not disappear, but depends on children's situations.
Cadango supported the mental health consultant bill that passed last year. It was written by a state lawmaker who was once a kindergarten teacher herself.
A lot of these issues, the mental health issues, I had no idea how to deal with them.
California state lawmaker Blanca Rubio says ending expulsion and adding consultants to a classroom rather than pulling the troubled children out got some parents fired up.
I'm thinking, it's all good, but you should have seen how many posts of people just really not happy with what we did. They said, well, oh yeah, you know, leave those kids in there to ruin my kids' education. I mean, it was really nasty comments on our social media because of this, and I thought, it's a no-brainer, you're helping children.
Her goal is to eventually expand it to K through 12 classrooms. She's still waiting for the data on how many children and teachers have been helped through the program and how many are showing signs of success. It's data we're waiting on too. Cadango's end goal is to have mental health consultants helping the teaching staff at all 50 of its preschools.
It's not always the best paid work, not always the best appreciated work, and it's certainly hard work, but it's valuable. They are helping to lay the foundation.
I enjoyed my trip to California a lot, and it was really neat to see this program. We've been talking a lot about middle and high school students, and you don't think about the younger kids and the importance of really laying the groundwork and building the relationships with teachers at a very young age. LaShonda, you have 148 counselors in Round Rock ISD, and some are working in elementary classrooms, of course. How does that look different than counselors working in middle and high schools, and how are they able to help children in that way?
We are really fortunate to have the number of counselors that we do in our school district. We are servicing 51,000 students across our district, so 148 counselors, while it may seem like a lot, when you're looking at 51,000 students, we can always use a little more. Our high school campuses, where we have high schools that are pushing 4,000 students, we have about 10 counselors on those campuses. And a lot of the work that they're doing is more academic based. And unfortunately, because of the nature of high school itself, a lot of the work is sometimes reactive rather than proactive. But many of our high school campuses are going to a model where they can form groups on campus to work with students on mental health needs, and that's kind of incorporated at one high school in particular throughout their school day, where kids could say, instead of going to, well, I'm sorry, not instead of going to class, of course, but a period during the day called flex time, where they can go in and have some counseling work that they can do with other students and counselors as well. Middle school, you will see counselors working with students via groups, but also through classroom guidance. But similar to what the
therapists were doing here with the preschool students, at our elementary level, our counselors are constantly in the classroom providing guidance lessons to students, but what they're also doing is working with those teachers to kind of model how to de-escalate a situation. You heard in the piece, the lady said that instead of pulling those kids out of class, they're working with those students in class. And the reason to work with those students in class is, one, it keeps them in class and keeps them learning. But then secondly, it helps the student learn how to control their emotions and get to a place where they can explain what's really going on. And so they're modeling that behavior as well for the other students in class. The counselors, if there's a student that's really upset or a student that's really emotional, they will come into the classroom and they will model for the teacher how to de-escalate what's going on, so you can get to a point with that child where they can have those conversations about what is really going on, what is the emotion behind the behavior that you're seeing.
A great question from the audience, maybe for Ruth or Amy. What programs are in place to help teachers deal with stress? That was one of the main reasons also why we saw this program happening in California, is because, you know, teachers are stressed out and they're sometimes at their wits' end and they're not thinking about what's the best thing for this child in this moment. And so being able to work with that consultant to give them the tools, you know, to get a much better outcome and support that student better.
And a lot of the professional development I did the 5 weeks before school started, the training I got asked to do the most was called Balance of Boundaries, and it was for staff, and it was time really to talk about how you're taking care of yourself. I think a lot of times when we talk about self-care, it's just very surface level, like for women, like go get a pedicure and then your life will be soft, and it doesn't work that way. And so really going deep into what does it mean to take care of myself, and realizing that our staff, if they're not really investing in that self-care, they're not going to be able to continue at the level they are to help students in the wide variety of behavior things or emotional things that students are dealing with today. And so really giving staff time to sit and think about that and what are things they can do for themselves, and that it's not selfish. You know, a lot of times we'll hear it's okay to be selfish and take care of yourself, which I don't even like that. Like, self-care is not selfish. And we currently have a generation of students that are so anxiety-ridden, and anxiety is now the #1 mental health issue for our teens. And how do we model for them how we're taking care of ourselves? Because if we're that anxious and we're going, they're not learning from us how to have a calmer life. And so really starting with staff for their self-care, but knowing it's going to go down to the students at the same time.
I know, being a new teacher to Round Rock this year, I was lucky enough to go to some of Amy's trainings that they gave for new teachers, and then also at my campus, they talked about the bedrock leadership, and we talked about things that are priorities, and trying to go through as a teacher, there's a lot that comes our way, and trying to balance what is a priority, what can wait a little bit, what is not urgent. And so I think as a teacher, you want to give your best to your students, and Round Rock is great about valuing their teachers so that we feel like we can be there every day for our kids and put their needs first.
Another great question from the audience. Thank you guys for texting in questions. This person says, often the children most at risk are not the vocal ones. To help identify them, are there plans to increase the number of social workers within the school district? And this may be a great question for, say, a superintendent, but Jeffrey, you're, at the top looking over the safety and security for the district. All districts would love millions of dollars to hire more social workers or therapists working with kids, but are those conversations happening? And when you look at the needs of the district, is that high on the priority list?
Well, safety and security for the district is our highest priority. If you can't create a safe learning environment, the chances for a student to succeed, they diminish. So every option that we can explore, including additional social workers, have been discussed, and we're looking for options to increase in areas where there is a definite need, and that is one of the areas of discussion that we've had as a district.
Karen, I'm curious, NAMI, do you guys lobby, for various priorities in school districts and say, hey, we'd really like you guys to shift your focus, in this area? Are there things that you see lacking that maybe school districts could, do better or fill in the gaps more?
Absolutely. Certainly during the legislative session, we're at the Capitol quite a bit, and as well as the advocates that we train to be out there and we really are looking in collaboration with NAMI Texas, the state affiliate, at looking at what the issues are that are really important to us. And then I think one of the things that we've come to recognize is the power of partnering with like-minded organizations. So your Texas Association of Social Workers and your counselors, really working together. So we did see some shifts happening during this legislative session, which is good. I mean, I think we continue to move in the right direction around that in terms of increasing, numbers of mental health, counselors and whatnot in the schools. And certainly, just from hearing from these Round Rock Independent School District representatives that we certainly are seeing in this school district as well, that they're making it a priority. I really want to challenge us all to think about something, though, is that I think that especially when we talk about mental health, while we place a great focus, I mean, much like that story was talking about, a great focus on therapists and social workers, and those certainly, these are people that have amazing training, so they bring unique perspectives that we need. But I do think it's important to recognize that as human beings, we long to be connected. We long to be in relationship. It doesn't matter if you're 5 or 15 or 45 or 95. That's what we long for. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that we have the power to transform our communities by being more engaged with each other and with our children at all different levels. Not just school teachers with their kids or whatever, but we as parents with each other. And really, it is that power of seeing people. Because I think that was the beauty of the first story about the school bus driver. Here's these kids that they see every day, and it was like, I noticed something different. They saw that young woman. And so it's the same thing. I think so often we see each other, and we see sometimes when things maybe where somebody needs to talk or just needs a moment, but we're so busy. So it's just go, go, go. And as much as I love my smartphone like all the rest of you, and that's how I got here in time and didn't get lost, we think we have a false sense of connection because of that. And so do our kids. And what we need is to be spending time together. I know it's gonna sound super old-fashioned. Turn off the TV, everybody put your phones away and have a meal together. It doesn't even matter what you're eating, it's the fact that you're sitting at a table together. And our families need that, our kids need that. And they need to see us because we're as guilty. We talk a lot about kids and their phones, but come on, adults. I can't tell you how many times I sit in a restaurant and I see parents sitting there with their phones and their kids are sitting right there. We need each other. And so while we certainly need more mental health counselors and we certainly need more folks going into that field, we also need to understand the power we have to change the culture we live in and to get reconnected with each other.
I'm going to say one thing about the question, like what are schools doing, that our society as a whole doesn't do mental health really well. Right? I think we're seeing such an increase of the expectations on schools because our society has pretty much not done a good job in this area. And so, most of our staff that went to school to be teachers and stuff, they didn't do it to identify mental health needs and stuff, but it's become necessary in our society because it's the place where they are going to be identified, and so many other areas have failed. So I just want us to remember that too, that yes, it's on schools right now, but it's because a lot of other places haven't had it, and we as a society haven't talked about it, so now we're expecting schools to deal with it.
Another great question from the audience. How are parents being notified about all of these new programs? So we've talked about a lot of different programs, and I'm sure depending on the program, there's a different way that you get the word out. But LaShawna, maybe it's the partnership with Blue Bonnet Trail, or bringing those counselors in to help students, or the bus driver. Is that something that the bus driver program to train all bus drivers? Is that a type of communication that you send to all parents in the district saying, hey, we're doing this? How does that work?
Well, I can only speak for Round Rock ISD and really particularly counseling services. We partner with our communications department, and our communications department does push out information to parents. That information does go out via our district website, our district communication system, but also our social networks with our district as well.
I can say for something like the school bus driver training that we did, you know, that we didn't push that out and let everybody know. It was training for bus drivers so that they were more equipped with what they can do. Our teachers, our staff get trained in a variety of things all year long that not necessarily everybody knows exactly what that is. I mean, it was great to have it highlighted, but I think the biggest thing is that our staff is able to respond when they see something. I know for our anonymous alert system, there's constant marketing from our communications team at the school level with parents in a variety of different ways so that everybody knows that's a resource that they have to be able to say something if they see something, and how if they're concerned about someone, a peer or another student, that if they can't say that themselves, they can put it in anonymously and no one will ever know.
I also think it's really important just for parents to become involved in school. That's going to be how you get to know what's happening on your campus of your children, is if you get involved. There's the PTA, there's also, speaking of music, there's always a need for boosters in different various parts of your child's campus, so the more you can get involved, the better it's going to be for you to be informed, but also for your student and the campus as a whole.
Another question from the audience. Is it just as simple as this? Rules and boundaries teaching consequences to actions?
I'm going to say no because we're humans. One question we get from parents a lot is, well, can you tell me what are all the signs that I need to watch for whatever the situation may be? And the honest answer is it varies for kids. It varies per person. So yes, there's always maybe rules and regulations that you can say that we need to make sure if this happens, then B happens. But because we're all so very different, that there's not one thing that's going to work for every single person. But what I've heard here a lot is we got to make sure that we have those relationships with one another, whether that's parent to child or parent to a neighbor, adult to adult, making sure that you have those relationships. Because when you start to see something that's different, and whoever it may be, whether it's your child, whether it's your spouse, or whether it's your neighbor, those are red flags that there's something going on and that there's that you need to have maybe tougher conversations.
And I agree completely. I can speak on this from a personal level. My sister committed suicide when she was in high school at the age of 16. My dad's a cop. My brother was a cop. I'm a cop. And so we look back and we're like, how did we miss this? And afterwards you find out that friends knew about these things. They saw the signs, they heard her talk, but no one at that time believed that this would actually happen. So I look at where we've evolved from 1996 to now, and we've made great strides. These are conversations as law enforcement that we used to not have. And now it's at the forefront of what's being pushed out as a priority amongst law enforcement. So I think those relationships, again, going back to the video, those relationships as the panel has spoke about so passionately, those relationships are the biggest priority and the biggest key to closing those gaps, because you're able to see things from different vantage points, from different perspectives, and you're able to close those gaps and get them the treatment that they need before something tragic happens.
So final question, and we'll move on to the next story. This last story touched on this, and we've gotten some emails and comments from viewers saying, you know, what about the family aspect, and at what point do you bring the parents into the conversation? With the mental health consultant program in California, they bring the parents in very early and sit around the circle, and they are part of the solution and part of figuring out how to best support that child. Circling back around too, we had a question from the audience come in that we didn't get to on the threat assessment. When you see red flags and you're trying to put a plan together to help that child, Jeffrey, at what point do you bring the parents into that conversation?
I think the parent should be a part of that conversation from the onset. I think that the parent has the relationship that is far extensive than what we could ever develop on an 8 to 5 or 7:30 to 3:30 time frame. So the parent should be involved every step of the way. And we should work hand in hand. We should work step by step, making sure that we're discussing all areas and all opportunities that may help our student and that child overcome any challenges that they exist. It's a partnership, and again, it goes back to that one family. The students are our family, but those parents are too. So it takes all of us working together to make sure that we get the best services and best treatment and assistance that our students need.
And I was just going to kind of echo the same thing. When a student goes to a counselor because they may have thoughts of suicide or they may have made an attempt, or just having those conversations, the parents are brought in very early on, because it's important to understand that, kind of speaking to what Amy said, that while the school has been called to task to provide so much support for students, where 10, 15 years ago that wasn't the case, it's really important that parents are involved, because once that child goes home, they're the ones that are overseeing the child. But a lot of times what we see is that parents don't even know what they need to know to support their kid. And by allowing, or by bringing the parents in early on, the school counselor, the school SRO, the teacher, the principal, whoever is there at the school supporting that child can provide those resources for that parent to help not only get support for the child, but also support for the family going forward. Because we know once we're in crisis, our heart rates are elevated and we're not thinking clearly. If the school calls and there's something going on with your child, there's no parent that's going to be able to think very clearly about what the next steps need to be. So the campus personnel are there to support them through that process.
Okay, we're going to move on. We have one last story, one last chance to text or questions for our panel. And what you're about to see is a solution beyond school district. We found a much broader coordinated program in the state of Ohio. Aaron traveled to Delaware, Ohio, outside of Columbus. It's the hub for a regional teen suicide prevention program.
When you think of a 24/7 call center, this is probably not the picture that comes to mind. Inside a historic home near downtown Delaware.
Helpline 211, this is Amanda. How can I help you?
Amanda Blake talks to total strangers on their worst days.
You never know when the phone rings necessarily what it's going to be.
When people in 7 central Ohio counties dial 211, they can anonymously tell call takers about abuse, family violence, or any mental health issue. Last year alone, Helpline says more than 15,000 people called and more than 11,000 texted, adults and children.
We had a child who was calling from school who was suicidal, and they were experiencing bullying, and so things just kind of kept escalating.
Their goal is to walk through next steps and connect callers with resources. In the bullying case, the child called Helpline and met with their school counselor on the same day.
The guidance counselor contacted the parent and got the parent to the school while we worked with local mental health agencies to get them an appointment for the next day.
While the call center is here, they don't just sit around waiting for the phone to ring. They also go into schools to identify students who are struggling.
In the past 3 years, my coworker and I have seen about 15,000 students.
Under the same roof is Sarah Lee Jefferson, who visits 21 campuses a year in Delaware and Morrow counties, where she teaches 7th and 9th graders an evidence-based program called SOS, Signs of Suicide.
We're teaching them not only what to look for in themselves, but what to look for in someone else. Because a lot of times when someone's struggling with this stuff, they have a hard time being able to get the help that they need, or even recognizing that they need to seek help.
I think you're really depressed and we need to talk to somebody.
It's part video and part guided discussion, and on the final day, students are handed this piece of paper with 7 questions. Questions that get right to the point. Have you thought seriously about killing yourself? And have you ever, in your whole life, tried to kill yourself or made a suicide attempt? Helpline turns the answers over to the school immediately so counselors can step in. Last year, of the 5,275 students screened, 1 in 10 acknowledged they were struggling. Jefferson believes there were more than that, but says it's not always easy to get teens to be completely honest. In her experience, some would rather open up to a stranger than their parents.
I think the reason we have had so much success personally is because it's an outside person. So a lot of times even kids have tried to even take the screening back from me because they're even scared about their counselor seeing it. So I think sometimes being that person that doesn't have like a necessarily connection to them every day can actually get you more results. This one in particular is a message I wrote to my father.
But Jefferson does have a close connection to suicide. She tells every student what it was like when her own father took his life.
And those are the pictures the only ones I could find of him smiling after he passed away.
He was 49, Sarah was 18.
that feels like he still gets to live on through the work that I do and the people that I get to touch.
One way she measures the program's success, tracking all suicides.
In 2019, we are of course not through the year, but we are only at 9 suicides in Delaware County. And in 2017 and 2018, it was consistently 19, which as you can see, 2016, we had 28.
A recent study shows it's got one of the lowest suicide rates in the state, but the rate in Morrow County has historically been higher. When it comes to teens taking their own lives, so far this year, there have been none. Helpline's Executive Director Susan Hansen says the suicide prevention program, which started in the early 2000s, came as a result of community leaders wanting to do more when suicides were on the rise.
I think one of the biggest challenges and where we've been very successful and fortunate is that we have a great set of community partners, agencies and organizations that are willing to work together. The schools are wonderful in that they are willing to open their doors to us.
Helpline also has a large operating budget of more than $2 million a year, funding that comes mostly from grants and county property taxes, specific dollars set aside for mental health, which was a levy approved by voters. The takeaway from this small, rural Ohio town, this is a community that believes mental health matters. So Karen, we're going to start with you on this one. How well are we connected in Central Texas in terms of services for helping youth in crisis? This was obviously county-based, county-driven. They're getting county tax dollars. Do we have something similar in our area, or do any school districts have something that you know of?
Well, I think that all of that sounded a bit to me a little like a lot of the crossover of some different things we have going on. So one is your local mental health authorities. So in Austin, Travis County, that's Integral Care. And then here in the Round Rock, Williamson County area, you've got Blue Bonnet Trails, which is your local mental health authority that has a 24/7 number where you can call, and there's actually licensed clinicians who will respond to those calls. They can, do an assessment, help you figure out what the next steps are. As well as in the state of Texas and throughout, we've got the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, so we also have that as well. And then a lot of people are not aware of the crisis text line, which is, I think, a great resource for you to know and to share with the kids and the teens in your life, because so many of them, as I tease my own daughters, it's like, hey, if you push this icon here with a phone, you can talk to me, because they text, Snapchat, you name it. And so having a crisis text line, so it's also a 24/7, 741-741, and you can text home, start, NAMI, help to that number, and I tested it. Like, someone responds immediately. So that's a really great resource, because then people can use it wherever they are, right? So whether it's for you yourself or someone you're concerned about, then you can get that kind of resource to help. So I think we are, in our, we've got some pretty robust systems helping us with those kinds of things. You're fortunate as well, I'll say, that you have a really robust NAMI affiliate that also offers all kinds of education. Going back to parents, we also talked about, I didn't mention that we also have a 6-week course that we offer at no cost for parents as well that helps support parents. And then you have all of this. So yes, I think we really have, I'm not sure that our local mental health authorities go into the schools and do that kind of assessment. You guys would know best, but I'm not aware of that specific. But I think as we're looking at, for instance, I know one of the other stories, maybe it was the one with Officer Sneed, talked about the fact that the numbers of suicides in AISD, for instance, last year, and how that had gone down dramatically. So I think we're starting to see the impact of a very collaborative approach, which is the other thing that you saw there. This is too complex for any one entity. Like, we can't imagine that only our schools and the district is going to figure this out. Like, it takes this collaborative effort of clinics and Blue Bonnet Trails and NAMI affiliates and AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide. All of these entities working together with the community to create that kind of change.
Officer Rodriguez, I was going to ask you to talk more about something we were talking about before we came out here on stage. You as an officer, you're walking around campus, you're talking to students, you're building those relationships. What are the story was about signs of suicide.
what are various factors that you pick up on, that you have picked up on, that a student is in a really low place?
There's several signs that you can pick up from students just by talking to them. You can have a student that comes and says hi to you every morning, and then one morning they don't say hi to you, or you address them and they just kind of ignore you. There's signs of dealing with students that got in trouble for any kind of criminal offense. It can be related to drugs, and then kind of get up some signs and symptoms of, are they self-medicating with these drugs? Do they have injuries that are self-harming to themselves, like cut marks on their arms? There's all kinds of signs that you can pick up, and there's no perfect storm of I need to have this, this, and this, and this, and this to have a sign of someone. It can just be one sign, and then you can run with it. But communication is the big thing. Just ask the questions. If they open up, listen. Don't cut them off. Let them finish with their sentences, and let them talk. And a lot of these students, you'd be surprised. I can talk to them in the hallway, and they're like, I just say hi to them, and then next thing you know, Officer Rodriguez, can I talk to you for a second? And then I bring them to the office and have a one-on-one conversation to figure out what's going on. But it's many signs, many different things that you can look for, but there's not a perfect storm of what you should look for. But every student is different, every person's different, so it can be hard sometimes, but there is red flags that you can look at. Obviously self-harm is a big red flag, and just depression. If that person's always by themselves and never communicates with anybody, it may be a good idea just go make a conversation with them, kind of see what's going on with their life. You may change it. They may say, I'm glad you said something to me today because I felt like I was going to hurt myself because I didn't have anybody. It can be as simple as that. So I think communication and just the pursuance of helping these kids and the follow through. Not just getting them the help, but checking in on them. Making sure that they're doing what they need to do. You see them in the hallway. Is everything okay? Do you need anything? And just making sure, reassuring them that there is people that care for them. And that's the biggest thing. A lot of kids, they want that assurance that someone actually cares for me and someone's actually there listening to my concerns, because it can be, you can do that one, pass the buck to the next person, but then they see that you don't follow through, or you don't try to see if there's anything else that you can do to help them. But once they see that, they'll give you a lot more respect, and they will even help you with other students that are maybe dealing with the same situation.
Well done.
I wanted to say something from the video, and then also as you were talking about the signs and symptoms, and they talked about the program they use is evidence-based, so it's research-based, evidence-based. It's not just somebody decided, from my own experience, this is what we need. And I think that's just really critical. At schools, sometimes we get calls from lots of different people that want to help, but really making sure our programs are evidence-based, research-based. I know mental health first aid was mentioned earlier. That's something that we've started doing in the district, the youth version, and it's a really robust 8-hour training for staff members. We trained nurses last year on it, and it's evidence-based. Like, we know it's the best practices out there, and it is updated when new research is out. The bus driver training was Talk Saves Lives, which is from the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. So really making sure and knowing that the training we're doing, what we're presenting, is the best practices that we have out there. And so we know things like there's not just a set of these are 1, 2, 3, what it looks like in everybody, just because that was my experience, that we get that broad view so that we make sure we don't miss anything.
And I would just say, kind of to add to what everyone has said tonight, is suicide is a difficult topic to talk about. But I think a lot of times we're just afraid to not only have that conversation, but to call it what it is. When we talk to students, and we may ask, sometimes parents will ask, well, do you plan on hurting yourself? Well, to the kid, taking their life may not be hurting themselves. It's a release of some pain that they're going through. But being really specific and not being scared to ask those questions. Do you plan on killing yourself? Do you have a plan? Well, what is your plan? And really getting down to the details of it, and thinking about, well, if I don't ask these questions, what are the possible alternatives?
I was just going to add that we don't have any out there tonight, I realize, but they're on our website under Crisis Resource. If you go to our website, which is NAMICentralTX.org, it's another kind of evidence base, which is the Columbia Suicide Severity Risk Assessment cards. And so we've developed some cards that have signs on one side, and it's exactly that. It just goes through the questions and then kind of walks you through what's the level of risk. So really helpful tool, and we have some cards that we can make available. The other thing that I want to say is I just want to piggyback on what Officer Rodriguez was talking about in terms of just really, and this is to parents specifically, what you heard him talking about was really this ability to do some active listening. And as a parent, I can own that so often as I hear a kid talking to me, or immediately I go to solution. Let me fix this for you. And I stop listening. And so creating that space, because that's what Officer Rodriguez does. He just asks a question and then he listens and he creates that space. And then he probably says, tell me more. And so I know as a parent, I've really had to work at that. It's work to do that, because I think as parents, we don't like to see our kids struggling. So it's real easy to want to just, let's fix it and let's brush aside, because again, it's not a topic we want to talk about. But you really kind of have to, I often tell parents, it's like, just take a deep breath, just stay calm, just listen. Later, you can freak out. Okay, later on. Go close the door. But during that conversation, because they're looking to you, they need you to be like, it's going to be okay. And it is. And here's the thing, many times we don't have the conversation because we're afraid. We don't know, I won't know what to say, I'm going to say it all wrong, I don't know any. You don't have to have all the right answers. You just got to be there. You just got to say, I'm right here, and I don't have all the answers. Be honest. Let yourself be vulnerable and say, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to figure this out. And that can be so powerful. And that's what Officer Rodriguez gets to practice every day. And so I think as parents, speaking as a parent, we've got to practice that too.
Amen.
That reminds me, I was presenting to a health science class in Round Rock High School about mental health. The teacher asked me to come in, and the students at the end got to write questions on a note card anonymously and talk about being scared to death, right? Like high school students can ask me anything they want. But they were great. They had questions about when I was a mental health counselor, like different things I saw and all of this. They were just curious. And then at the end I said, every client I saw had one thing in common. And they were like, oh, they wanted to be happy. And I was like, no, they all wanted to be understood and completely accepted for who they were at that one moment. And I realized looking at our students, that's what they want too, right? They don't have to have answers, but they want to be understood and completely accepted for who they are at that moment. Not who they are if they're going to get into X college, or who they're going to be once they're not struggling with depression. And as educators, as parents, we can do that, right? Like, that doesn't take anything. We can be understanding and accepting. And those are the two critical things that can make a difference, I think.
This could be for Amy, or it could be for Jeffrey, or both. Chime in. Someone from the audience asks, what is in place to increase the cultural competencies of staff to identify and address specific issues experienced by students with different cultural and racial backgrounds?
Well, there are many options that we have, and there are things, for example, Beyond Diversity is something that we've looked into, and we've actually hosted that training here in Round Rock, because one of the things you want to do is you want to increase the awareness and the understanding of those who are different than you. You want to be able to understand their experiences and understand. You learn a lot more about yourself than you knew prior to going through that training. So, and I can speak from safety and security and as a law enforcement officer. These are areas as well that the district has placed emphasis on. These are areas as well that law enforcement has placed emphasis on, because mental health is a big priority. But cultural awareness and cultural diversity, those things are equally important. And I think in order to understand students and reach students who have crisis, you need to know certain things about those students, and you need to know certain things about yourself, because your approach may be from a vantage point that's incompatible with reaching that student. So providing that type of training and increasing the opportunities for us to understand the differences is something that the district has focused on, and we will continue to do so.
And I just want to say, with a lot of the especially mental health first aid does a great job of that, of how signs and symptoms can look different depending on my gender, my cultural background, and how we can't just keep stereotypical ideas in our head of what depression looks like, because it can look really different from how I was raised and my culture and all of those type of things. And so I think that's an ongoing conversation with any mental health training, is how does it look specifically to that one person based on a whole host of background background information for that student, and so I know that's something that we do also.
So, LaShonda, this would be probably a good question for you to answer from the audience, and I'm really curious too. It says, talk about determining the difference between behavioral problems and mental health issues. How do you treat them differently?
Well, I wish that was an easy question to answer. So our campuses, all of our counselors do have counselors on them, but there's also behavioral interventionists. And what a behavioral interventionist will do is come in and work with the student regarding the behavior. But behavioral interventionists and counselors work very closely together because we know that all behavior stems from something else that's going on. You'll hear a lot of times, oh, they're just wanting attention. Well, if your kid is seeking attention because by throwing the Lego across the room, then give your kid the attention that they need. To answer that question, behavioral issues, I can't say that there's a mental health issue that underlines it, but there is a precursor to that behavior, and so the behavioral interventionist and the counselor on campus will work collaboratively to address the concerns of that student.
And Ruth, this makes me think of you because you're a music teacher and you're a parent, so you are interacting with your own child in this capacity and then the children that you teach. So if a child is acting up or your own child, do you stop in that moment and say, okay, how should I approach this situation from the mental health aspect, or, coming down on them harshly?
So one of my favorite trainings that I've ever had was the Capturing Kids' Hearts training with Flip Flippin'. It's an amazing program that is really all about the relationships that you build with your students. And the 4 questions I use on my children quite often. I have a 7-year-old daughter who, red hair and hot mess. I love her dearly. But those 4 questions that I use in my classroom, and sometimes as a parent and as a teacher, you just have to be able to breathe. You have to be able to be patient. It's okay to give yourself a little time to de-escalate the situation. So when there's a problem, you don't have to face it right then. It's okay to take a little deep breath and walk away before you come back. And sometimes your kids just need time to breathe and time to relax. They have a lot of pressure on them. I feel like kids are growing up far faster and thinking about things that I did not think about when I was their age. And so I think sometimes we just have to be patient with them and patient with ourselves.
Great input. Another question from the audience, and me coming from a family where, you say everything's fine all the time, we've got no issues going on, and, being afraid of being judged if you do ask for help. This person says, how do you address the stigma associated with receiving mental health care?
Well, I think the first step is that you have to get over the stigma that you have for yourself, so that you'll be willing to reach out and get that help. And like many of us have said up here, we don't judge anyone when we have a broken arm or we have heart issues or lung issues or anything like that. I think as a society, we have to get to the point where we're understanding that mental health is the fundamental issue that we need to be addressing with ourselves and within our community. But I think the first thing you have to do is get over whatever stigma you have associated with it for yourself.
I just want to add to that. When I was a mental health counselor, I needed to go to counseling. And it was really hard to make that call. And you would think somebody who's trained in this, has spent their whole life, like a majority of their life, saying this is great, everybody should do this, there's no stigma. And so I think sometimes it's recognizing that it's there, and I still need to do it anyway, right? And it's going to be hard, but the more, and the first call, and going to the first appointment, or seeking that first help, it will get easier and easier and easier. And that when you find a good counselor or a therapist, that they are really there to help you walk through that shame. I liked how you said it's shame, and how they'll walk you through that, because that's part of your journey also.
Yeah, in my own family, when we just were hiding everything that was actually going on, it's crazy how when you actually do talk about it, how everyone else starts coming out of the woodwork. That they either know somebody or they themselves were experiencing something. And even in doing the stories with the teachers and kiddos, same thing with the signs of suicide, or another story that we didn't show tonight, a mental health check-in board, when a student said, hey, I'm not feeling so hot today, and that's okay. And so many other kids find themselves in that same boat. Final question.
and it goes along with us talking about getting help. And hopefully one of you is familiar with this program, but it's someone asking, is there an equivalent to Austin's psychiatric emergency services in Williamson County? So if someone on the panel is maybe familiar with that service, is there a similar program in Williamson County?
Are you, Officer Rodriguez, aware of?
I know we have Georgetown Behavioral that helps out a lot. I don't know what the extent is as far as the help that they need, that they can provide. I know we send a lot of patients and obviously people that we deal with on a regular down there. But I know Blue Bonnet it helps out a lot as well. There's a lot of different ones that are popping up recently and are very new to the system because of the fact that the mental health problem is increasing. I know starting, in the law enforcement, when I first hit patrol, that was one of the big things they were saying is like, be prepared because you're not going to be in the chases and the fights. You're going to be dealing with people with mental health issues. And then you go out and you do that for a few years, and then you go into the schools and you're like, it doesn't go away. It's not like you just deal with it outside of campus. It's everywhere. It's in every city. It's something that's not going to go away, and it's just increasing. So, but as far as your question, I believe there's several others, but Georgetown is another one that I believe offers help.
I think one of the things that we know is, again, we have communities that are very much aware of, I think, not to get on the soapbox, but I think in terms of really understanding how important it is that we start to develop a whole new system and approach to mental health crisis. We unfortunately put officers like Officer Rodriguez in a place in which they are responding to mental health crisis, and they may not be obviously equipped, if we're fortunate they are, and in the right situation. But I think it's really looking at the system, and I think we have communities that are really looking at diversion. How do we divert people away from the criminal justice system and make sure that they get the care that they need? And so certainly I know, in Travis County and surrounding counties in Williamson County, you have communities that are looking at what are the alternatives, much like what you did. What's the best practices? What are some of the things going on in communities throughout the United States that we might look as models for our community? I also just want to remind everyone that the numbers are 1 in 5. That's the prevalence rate. And there's no magic bubble over this room or your house or this school or wherever you are. It's 1 in 5. And so that's a higher prevalence rate than cancer, diabetes, emphysema. And it means that every single one of us know, love, or care about someone who is living with some mental health issue. And if it's not you yourself, it's someone in your immediate family or your extended family or your neighbor or your coworker or someone that you care about. So I think we see the bubbling up of lots of conversations about it, and I think that that's a good thing. So I want to express my thanks to KXAN for really giving us the opportunity to have this conversation, for doing some great stories, because this is what we need. We need to talk about this. Amen. We need to share stories, and we need to continue to have conversations with each other. And I love what you were talking about, that student that says, well, if you adults would take care of your mental health, that would help. So we as adults need to be taking care of our mental health, and we need to help lead those conversations and really model for our youth what it can look like.
And I just wanted to add that every community does have resources that they have available to them. Bluebonnet Trails is the mental health authority for Williamson County. Integral Care is the mental health authority for Travis County. And we sit here, most of us school districts, and we spill out information because it's the work that we do every day. But each of those agencies have what they call a mobile outreach team that anyone in a community can call. If you're having, whether it's you personally or whether it's a family member, you can call those numbers, and I don't have them off the top of my head, but Bluebonnet Trails has a mobile outreach number, and Travis Integral Care has a mobile outreach number. And what that is you can call those numbers 24/7. They're staffed by licensed professionals, and kind of have them talk you through what may be going on. And if need be, they will actually come out to your house, to your job, wherever you may be, and provide support for you and help you seek treatment if necessary.
And good news, real quick before you go, we have a resource page on saveourstudentstx.com. So a lot like the NAMI website that Karen was mentioning and the resources in Travis and Williamson, we have a huge amount of resources on that page, on that website. So if you forget all of this when you leave here tonight, just go there and it's there to help.
Well, I had one job, and that was to keep us on time, but this is great that we did go a little bit over, but that's because an outstanding set of questions and an outstanding panel. If we didn't get to your questions, we do apologize, but we'll pass them along, and the experts will try to answer those at our special website at KXAN. It's saveourstudentstx.com. Many more stories you can see there as well. And again, saveourstudentstx.com. You can also join our Facebook group. That's at the KXAN Facebook page. Look for the Save Our Students tab there as well. And we encourage you, and they did it way better than I did, but you can talk to your friends, talk to your families, talk to your neighbors. And we've got some information at the tables outside, some resources and information if you want to stop by the tables there. And again, thanks to the panel, because we knew they were experts. We knew they were experts, but we got to see their passion tonight, and I think that's what separates them. And as a parent, I feel a lot better after tonight as well. So on behalf of KXAN, Round Rock ISD, thanks so much. Have a great night and a great week.